grateful everyone was able to join us today. We're going to get started in just a few moments. In the meantime, I did want to introduce our two speakers that we're going to be hearing from today. The first is Nate Nelson. He's the Director of Remote Operations Management, and he'll go through the bulk of the presentation today. Nate has been with 3Share since 2012 and has worked in IT for 20 years, doing nearly every role in IT operations. He also holds professional certifications from AWS and Adobe. And we'll also be hearing from Clemente Pereyra. He has been with 3Share since 2015, and as of last year is our very first Director of Technology. He's also an Adobe Certified Master AEM Architect. So without further ado, I will pass it on to Nate Nelson to begin the presentation.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. We will go ahead and get started. What we're going to be covering today, we'll do a quick introduction. I'll just discuss a little bit about what this is going to be about. We'll discuss a little bit about cloud and why cloud. And then what I'm going to do is walk you through some problem solving just to demonstrate some of the capabilities and reasons for leveraging cloud. This is geared towards people who are either considering migrating to the cloud or are already in the cloud and maybe not leveraging it to its full capability. And then we'll save some time for some Q&A. All right, so just quickly what this is going to be about is this is meant to be, migrating to cloud, managing your cloud infrastructure, optimizing it. So like I said, we're going to walk through a couple of problems that we've dealt with recently, just within the last few months. And without a cloud-based infrastructure, these would have been very difficult. So Peyton gave me a quick introduction. Thank you for that, Peyton. And just a quick overview of what my team is and what my role is here. So we are a remote operations team within 3Share, which provides 24/7 support. We have an AEM and AWS focus, and we spend quite a bit of time troubleshooting issues, building out infrastructures, and focusing on AEM and AWS. So why cloud? After you see these problems that we've solved, it'll pretty much sell itself. Sales may be a bad word. I'm not trying to sell cloud. I'm just trying to make sure to introduce people to its capabilities, what it has to offer. There's many companies that still have their own data center, or maybe they're leveraging somebody else's data center. All of these problems could be solved without having a cloud infrastructure, but not with a performance and speed that you get from having it and the ease of capability. So without further ado, let's discuss the first problem that we've dealt with recently. So this is actually a phone call that we had recently with a client. Client comes to us and says, "Hey, Nate, we've got a big product launch and are expecting 10 times more traffic. Can you help?" "Sure. When is it? What are you expecting?" "It's this Wednesday." Ouch. As in tomorrow? This is Tuesday that they called me. And then we hear chirp, chirp. "Yeah. Can you help us out?" "Sure. We'll get to work on that right away." So what we did by leveraging a cloud-based infrastructure is horizontal scaling. Everybody's heard of horizontal scaling. This is when you build out additional servers. Rather than increasing resources such as CPU and memory, you build out additional servers so you have a bigger footprint to handle a larger load. Now, leveraging a cloud infrastructure, this can be done very quickly without, and you only pay for what you need. So you're not having to allocate a whole bunch of hardware. You can also do this without downtime. And that's exactly what we did. We leveraged, because we had their infrastructure in AWS, and this is not specific to AWS, this would work with any cloud infrastructure. We were able to duplicate their publishers and spin up 3 times the amount of publishers in less than a day. They were able to test them quickly, make sure they look good, and then during the amount of time that they expected this traffic, make them live. They get increased resources. This was all done with no downtime. And obviously there's a lot of benefits that come from that. The biggest one is convenience and speed. And yes, you could do this without being in a cloud infrastructure, but it would take months to allocate hardware, months to copy the data. You may end up running into some downtime because of it too. The nice thing is the customer pays for what they need. So when they're done, we just delete them. It's temporary. So we just delete all the extra servers as soon as the launch is over, and they know what this costs. They're able to budget for it, and they don't have to pay extra for it when they're done. So what came to us was a pretty large problem we were able to solve pretty easily because of the cloud infrastructure we had. Now, this is where the catch-22 comes in with people that are already in the cloud but are maybe not leveraging it and optimizing it the way they should. Because it's easy to do and there's tools that are built in to do this, it can get out of hand pretty quickly. You could end up with hundreds of servers that you are not using anymore that are not cleaned up. So you do have to pay attention and have some standards around how your infrastructure is managed and make sure to keep it clean. Otherwise, the cost will just be out the door. You'll think it's going to cost X amount of dollars per month, and it'll be way more than you expected. So you do have to be careful. That is the catch of the fact that it's easy and convenient. Now, from our side, being in the operations team, like I said, we do have we are a managed services provider, but we really are the customer's operations department. And for us, this allows us to do this work with a small team without a lot of overhead, and it allows us to do it quickly. So let's go to problem 2. Now, this is a little bit more of a tricky problem, and this is something that can be done. This is more particular to AEM. Customer needs to publish over 2,800 pages. Sure, that happens. It is a large amount of content, but the trick here is there are some catches. These 2,800 pages need to stay hidden from the public until a specific time. That's fine. That can be done with an author. That's what the author's for. You can author the content. You can see the content without having to publish it. You can also have a preview server, which is a pretty common practice within AEM, where your internal customers, your internal company, and coworkers can see the content. Make sure to preview it before it goes live. Now, the problem here is this doesn't happen within seconds. If you need to publish nearly 3,000 pages, it's going to take some time. All that content is going to have to replicate to each of those publishers wherever they are at, especially if it's geographically dispersed, which it was in this case. They had not only publishers in the US, they had some outside of the US as well. There's no way you're going to publish that amount of content in minutes. It's going to take an entire day before that amount of content gets published. Now, we were able to solve this problem. We did it leveraging what we just discussed in the previous issue by using horizontal scaling. So we leveraged the tools built into AWS to copy publishers. And then what we did is set up what people were commonly referred to as a blue-green model, or a private live model is what we called it in this case. So we had a private set of publishers and a live set of publishers. Now, using some of the built-in tools that we had with, carefully managing the replication agents, we allowed authors to work on the private publishers and privately published content while customers were not able to see it. They were able to view it, make sure everything looked good. And then when they're ready, literally it was at a specific moment, we swapped them out. The swap took seconds, and within seconds, now they have, over 2,800 pages live. This all was done without any downtime, and we were using built-in tools to do this. It did take some work in the sense that we had to be very careful. They had some legality issues that required them to not be able to publish this content before a certain amount of time. So if we didn't do this, it would have taken an entire day. It would have been, streamlined content in, and they specifically wanted it to happen as quickly as possible. We were able to do it within seconds with this. Now, the other benefit of this, just like we talked about with the horizontal scaling, is you throw away the extra servers when it's done. So now when we swapped, we made the private servers live. The live servers shut them down because now they've got stale content. and deleted them. So they're not spending any extra money. They only spent what they needed to during those couple of days while they were working on the private publishers. So kind of a tricky situation, but it solved a pretty large problem and was a huge success for the customer. So now let's talk about an additional problem here. This is something that is a need in the majority of companies, disaster recovery. Now, the trick here is disaster recovery. We've all known about it in IT for years. I think, like Peyton said, I've been in IT for over 20 years, and I've worked on large-scale disaster recovery implementations that end up costing more than your primary environment. Because you have to be able to use this disaster recovery environment, you have to be able to test it periodically and make sure that it works. Now, most companies don't keep budget for that. They want it, they need it, they don't keep budget for it because it's hard to justify because it's not your live environment. But think about if just the recent hurricanes, and if you had your data center in your own building in Florida and lost it, what would you do? That's where disaster recovery comes into play. Now, what's nice about using a cloud-based infrastructure is you can put it in a specific region that is usually geared towards an area that is known for being safe, that has their own, like AWS, for example, has specific data centers in areas that are less prone to natural disasters, for example. Now, you can geographically disperse them in multiple areas, but the nice thing is you can do this without any extra budget. So as long as you use best practices, you set up servers in multiple data centers or availability zones. And this already is leveraging the built-in disaster recovery and high availability that AWS has to offer. I know Google Cloud, Azure, all have the same thing. And as long as it's done by someone that knows what they're doing and they're using best practices, this can really give you a built-in disaster recovery environment. You can take it a step further, and you can geographically disperse them, across multiple states. You could go across multiple countries if you needed to. That would require more work that wouldn't be automatically built in, but you could leverage the tools within AWS to do it. Now, the nice thing is the tricky part comes with the author, right? So we can disperse the publishers or web servers in multiple data centers so that you're covered and protected if something happened. If you are using a CDN in front, that's already going to be dispersed without any extra work. Now, the author is where it gets a little bit tricky. There are some issues with setting up, hot standbys of the author. It's meant to be really, most companies primarily use it as one single instance. Now, but by using snapshots and AMIs, images within the cloud infrastructure and the cloud tools, you could have really good recent backups of this and stand it up somewhere else if something happened. The author is not live to the customer, so it's not going to affect your website. And if something were to happen in the data center that it happens to be within AWS, for example, you have snapshots and images of this environment if it's done correctly, and you could stand it up in another data center if that were to happen. So the benefits here are pretty obvious: convenience and speed. It's not going to cost anything more than you're already spending, and it's using built-in tools. The catch here is you do got to know what you're doing. Because setting up servers in the cloud infrastructure are pretty simple, you can click and build out new servers, but because of that, it's not going to be automatic. So you do got to know what you're doing, or at least have somebody that knows what they're doing. And as long as you do that, now you have built-in disaster recovery. That's pretty cool. There's no way we could have done that, even a decade ago. That to me is one of the biggest advantages. There's quite a few more, but these are the three most recent problems that we've dealt with just within the last few months. So I left a lot of time so we could cover any kind of questions or talk about any. I'm just open for discussion. I'm happy to answer anything here.
If you have any questions, you can post them either on the questions tab or on the chat tab, and then we can discuss them there.
Yes. So this is not directly related to Adobe's AEM Cloud offering. While behind the scenes, Adobe is using a cloud-based infrastructure, this is intended for an on-prem instance migrating to a cloud service provider, such as AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud, or doesn't have to be AEM related. Could be any application, but it is not. When I specifically say cloud, it's not related to Adobe's cloud offering.
Cool. So we're going to talk about embedding content in AEM. This is a very common request that we usually get on AEM projects, especially on AEM Sites project. The reason why it is important is, like, first, as we said, a lot of clients are asking about this, and many more. There are coming more requests with the days. Usually it's because the whole thing about reusing content, reusing things that they have built maybe in another platform, or maybe reusing even features that they have built on another platform and they want it to be in AEM and many other platforms too. So this is very common request that we get from clients about, okay, how can I have this created here? How can I put it in AEM? Or I want to create something like more complex maybe on the front end side, so I use this other tool instead of just coding everything on HTML. Well, there's several reasons why they would like to embed content within AEM, and usually the out-of-the-box option that we have are not enough. And as you may know, there are typically two out-of-the-box things. One is the embed component, and the other one is the text component, rich text component, which allows you to do source code editing, basically adding HTML code. So that is also possible, and that seems to be the more frequent way that we go through, but we're going to talk about another alternative now in this session. And another big factor about why this is important, why we should do it in the right way, is that it may interfere with the user experience on the site. So maybe someone added an HTML. If you give them total freedom about what the type of content that they can include, that they can embed, it could mess up with the whole user experience, like, of course, talking about the UI, the look and feel, or even just maybe it could break your site, like maybe some buttons that are usually are really important for the flow of the users in the sites are not available, you don't see them. Maybe that's probably because the embedded code that the author added broke everything. And also introduce some security risks. Most of them are already covered by the inner mechanism that AEM has to protect us from these type of things. But still, there are risks because we're giving a lot of freedom to authors to include anything, any type of code, to run any type of code on the website. So that is also risky. And that's why we are going to talk about this and why it's important to remark about how is the right way to do it. As we just briefly mentioned, two options, but typically there are 4 options, or at least I could count them to 4 so far. One is that, okay, we just give you the rich text editor. We allow you to add HTML there and do whatever you want as you please there. That's the one option. The other option that is also very common, this one maybe like 3 or 4 years ago was really frequent. We were seeing this a lot. Nowadays, with the core components that are all out of the box nowadays with the cloud, they are there already as soon as we spin up a new environment. We are seeing this by using the embed component, which is pretty similar. So in this session, we're going to talk all about embed and the HTML, but basically they are interchangeable. We can talk about the same thing on the source code editing for the rich text and on the HTML feature for the embed component. They do the same. They allow authors to include code. And another option is that the embed component already has some embeddables, and that's what we are going to talk later, like what is an embeddable. Core components includes one for YouTube, for example, so it's kind of a predefined way of embedding code. So they provide that for YouTube videos. That's the only one, and then you can extend them. And then option 4 will be just kind of develop a whole new custom component for whatever they want to include in our website. So 1 and 2 are pretty basics. They do not support all type of code. They are also risky. They could break things. Number 3 is not enough because it's only for YouTube. And option number 4, it may work in some cases, but usually when we do this is because it is at the dynamic side. So we want the author to be able to change that. We want to be able to do that in many other pages, in many other different ways too. So maybe custom component could be an overkill here. So that being said, let's go to the demo, and we're going to talk about all these topics that we just saw in real life, and we're going to see what would be the recommended way of doing it. So let's start by I have prepared just some use cases here so I can show you that what it's about. This came out when one of our clients, this idea of presenting this came out when one of our clients told us that they wanted to use some create some infographic that were really complex on the UI side to make it to develop on them. So they decided to use Genially, which is a tool to create this type of things. So I just created a brief example here to show you how it is. So the initial idea and what we would typically say is, okay, you just grab the code from there and insert it in the page. So one option is just using the HTML. And we saw that one thing is that it could just not work for some certain code that we get, for example, for the Genially one. And another option that we have, if we allow them to do this, if we allow them to just be free with all the code that you want to put, we can even break it. So for example, I can add, I'm an author and I just received my code from a design agency maybe. So I have requested Threshold to develop a component for me to just drop HTML because I just want to do that. So I paste the code that I have received. This is the code, just simple code that maybe an agency designed for me because I wanted to show the client, the final user, some infographics with cool effects. I click done. It's like, as you can see, I got the things that I want to show, but also changed everything. Like now I got my title looks blue with a dot at the beginning. My separators are not there anymore. The whole thing is broken, like these are all sections and now they are just in line next to each other. We see the text in red. Well, basically a mess. So that's another reasons about why we should not allow them to do this. So I'm going to just remove this component so it doesn't mess up with my style. And then another option, of course, for the YouTube, which is more like a trustable source, I can just, again, come here and I can embed this, just copy paste. This is what the author would do, right? This is what the author can here and select HTML and just put the iframe, which works fine, but it doesn't look that good. Like usually it looks bad because it's aligned on the left, there's a lot of space on the right. So it doesn't look good. So that's another thing that we have to take into account. Why not to provide them with this type of things? Then the right way to do it would it be creating an embeddable. So an embeddable is kind of a predefined place for the people to add embed code. So what we're talking here is that instead of letting them just put the whole code, what we need to do is understand the code and see, okay, how we can parameterize that, right? So if we look at, for example, at the code on Genially, we could see, for example, this is HTML. Okay. So we can see that it has, this is the same for everyone, and I have identified, for example, this one. This changed. This is the 90, and this is related to what I was seeing here, right? So what can I do here? Instead of just allowing the authors to be free with whatever they want to put as an HTML, I'm going to rebuild this in a way that can be parameterized. So instead of making it just copy paste the whole HTML, the author can just tell me, okay, what's the ID of your Genially creation? And that should be enough for me. So if I do that, then I can have a code like this. This is the same code that we just saw, but with some more formatting and looks better. And we can see here that I have added some parameters here. So instead of always being 100%, I could give them the option to select the width, to select the height, and of course, and most important, the ID of the creation that they want to share. So if we do this, we are making sure that every time that they want to use the Genially, they use it through this component, and all the components are coming and using this embeddable will look the same. So we are making sure that the site will not break when they add something. We are going to make sure that all of them looks the same, so they look and feel maintained and looks nice and clean. And to do this, it's super simple. As the first step, as you know, working with core component is creating a proxy. So just create a proxy for the embed component, which is basically talking about code, just one single XML file with just 6 lines, as you can see here, just extending that, nothing else. Then you need to create an embeddable, which is this one, in which you put your HTML. So basically you put your HTML and now everything is as usual as working with any type of AEM components. You have access to properties, you are coding in HTML. In this case, I just do it through properties. I should have done it through a Slim model, for example, to be more, follow the good practices. But now we are working on a typical component, as always. The good thing about this, and why we did it this way, why we created an embeddable instead of creating a separate component, is that then we can reuse all of the things that the embed component already provide. So they can use a single component to embed many things. So for example, in this case, with Genially, I add an embed component and I can edit it here. Instead of going to the HTML, which I would suggest to just disable as a whole this option, which you can do from the policies. It's very easy, just a checkbox. I'm going to just allow the authors to use embeddables, and they have all of these to choose from. YouTube, this is the out of the box that we saw. Genially is the one that we created, and then I created another YouTube custom just to see how easy it is. But with Genially, you can say I have just creation ID. I put my creation, and then you will see that I can say it, and it looks, first, it works because previously it wasn't working, but also I'm not breaking anything. The side, the component looks exactly how I want it, how I develop, and how the agency designed the site to be 100%, you know, the width of the body. So the whole thing is in place, and I'm not messing with anything else. I'm not breaking anything. The author still can use it. So I guess as a takeaway from this this session, beside the fact of just let's use the embed component to do this type of things, is let's think about the client and let's make sure that we provide as much as flexibility as they need, but not too much, because it could mess around with the website, and then we could end up in having to maintain, provide a lot of support. Maybe even the client could lose some time with some time to market, sorry, because they have broken something that they are not sure where it is, where it's coming from. So whenever we have to embed a code, let's just do everything that we can so we can do it in a way that is parameterized, that is controlled, that is under our control, and let's not give them fully freedom about what to drop into AEM, because that could get dangerous. That was it about it. So feel free to ask any question if you have one. I hope it was clear.
I'll wait for some questions to come up. If not, thanks Clemente and Nate for joining the call today and speaking. And thanks everyone else for joining the call. We'll be back in a few weeks to discuss Adobe Workfront and some associated use cases. And so we'll send out the replay link to this tomorrow. So anybody that you may know that have missed the call that would be interested, you can send it out to them then. So thanks everybody.